Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we begin tonight's game, I wanted to ask a question. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out today's sponsor, Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. Don't waste hours trying to find the best buy list price for your cards online. Simply send them to Card Conduit and let them take care of the rest. I've used Card Conduit multiple times already. I always use them for getting the best value of my extra cards and my extra bulk. I get fair prices for my cards and they save me tons of time. They have three main services. Their standard service lets you send them unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best price for your cards, including your bulk. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half of the fee of standard service and then charge no fee per card. Their new sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the description below or use the promo code POWER, you will also get 10% off of their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's start off by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Cal, piloting Shorikai, Genesis Engine. This is a stacks deck that uses its commander to generate card advantage and create tokens to polymorph into Hullbreaker Horror. Cal's opening hand contains a Hallowed Fountain, Soul Ring, Mystic Remora, Muddle the Mixture, Time Twister, Gitaxian Probe, and an island. Next, we have Dante, piloting the partner pair of Tymna the Weaver and Kodama of the East Tree. This is Dante's signature Kodama list that seeks to create infinite Kodama triggers and use Acerec the Archlich to kill the table. Dante's opening hand contains an Autumn's Veil, Grim Monolith, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Diabolic Intent, Mana Vault, Emergent Zone, and a Polluted Delta. Next, we have Noah, piloting the Gitrog monster. This classic CEDH deck is one of Noah's favorites. This deck assembles its commander, a discard outlet, and Ackmore Salvage to win the game. At least that's what I'm told. How does it win exactly? No one knows. Noah's opening hand contains a Marsh Flats, Command Tower, Finehorn Elves, Dark Ritual, and his three London Mulligans are Ancient Tomb, Grist the Hunger Tide, and Forbidden Orchard. Finally, we have Philip, piloting Abdel Adrian, Gorian's Ward with Candlekeep Sage as his background. This deck uses his commander to grind value through flicker effects and wins the game with a Labman combo. Philip's opening hand contains a Rhystic Study, Sea of Clouds, Mana Vault, Chrome Mox, Opt, Island, and a Misty Rainforest. Without further ado, let's kick off this lavish, lengthy, lenient, lamentable lampoon. Cal won the pig wrestling competition and gets to start us off. Cal draws a card for turn and plays an island. He casts a turn 1, Mystic Remora. No one has an answer, and Remora resolves. Cal ends the turn. Dante draws and plays a Polluted Delta. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Bayou onto the battlefield. He casts Avacyn's Pilgrim. He ships the turn. Noah draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts Finehorn Elves and passes the turn. Philip draws and plays a Sea of Clouds. Deciding to let this fish go hungry, he gives the turn to Cal. During his upkeep, Cal pays for his Remora. He draws and pays 2 life to cast Gitaxian Probe, targeting Dante. He looks at Dante's hand and draws a card. He plays a Mana Confluence. He taps it to cast a Soul Ring. Set up to pay for this fish for generations to come, he passes. Dante draws and plays an Emergence Zone. He casts his commander, Tymna the Weaver. He ships the turn. Noah draws and plays a Marsh Flats. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Bayou onto the battlefield. He casts Dark Ritual. Remora triggers and Cal draws. He casts his commander, the Gitrog monster. It enters and set up for the next turn, Noah passes. Philip draws and plays an island. He casts a Chrome Mox. Remora triggers and Cal draws. It enters and Philip imprints Opt. He casts Rhystic Study. Remora triggers and Cal draws again. To the reluctance of the table, Rhystic resolves. With everyone having their draw engines online, Philip gives the turn to Cal. During his upkeep, Cal pays for his Remora. He draws and plays a Tundra. He casts Rhystic Study. Philip draws from Rhystic and Cal's Rhystic resolves. With Mystic and Rhystic under his control, Cal passes. Dante draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Cal with Tymna and Philip with Avacyn's Pilgrim. They both take it and Dante gains 2 life. In his second main phase, Dante pays 2 life and draws 2 through Tymna. He plays a Wooded Foothills. He casts a Mana Crypt, 2 Rhystics, and a Remora trigger. He pays for both Rhystics and Cal draws through Remora. He cracks his Wooded Foothills, pays a life, and fetches up a Savannah onto the battlefield. He casts Grim Monolith, paying for Cal's Rhystic. Philip draws from his Rhystic and Cal draws from his Remora. Dante gives the turn to Philip. During his upkeep, the Gitrog monster triggers. Noah floats a mana and then sacrifices Command Tower, drawing a card. He draws and moves to combat. He attacks Cal with Gitrog. Cal takes it, and in his second main phase, Noah plays the swamp. He casts Green Sun Zenith where X equals 2. Both Ristics and Remora trigger, and they all draw. Zenith resolves, and Noah fetches up a Noose Constrictor onto the battlefield, shuffling Green Suns back into his library. With nothing else, Noah gives the turn to Philip. Philip draws and plays a Misty Rainforest. He holds open mana and passes the turn. During his upkeep, Cal lets his Remora die. He draws and plays a Hallowed Fountain into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts his commander, Shorikai, Genesis Engine. Ristic triggers and Cal pays. He ends the turn. During his upkeep, Dante loses his mana crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and moves to combat. He attacks Cal with Tymna and Philip with his Pilgrim. They both take it, and Dante gains 2 life. In his second main phase, Dante pays 2 life and draws 2 through Tymna. He casts a Mox Diamond, discarding Ancient Tomb. Both Ristics trigger, and Cal and Philip draw. He casts a Felwar Stone, with Cal and Philip drawing again. He casts Drannith Magistrate. Both Ristics trigger, and both players draw. He follows it up with a Ranger Captain of Eos. Both Cal and Philip draw, and Ranger Captain resolves. It enters, and Dante fetches up Allosaurus Shepherd into his hand. With nothing else, Dante passes the turn. During his upkeep, the Gitrog monster triggers. Noah floats a mana and sacrifices a swamp. Gitrog triggers, and Noah holds priority and activates Noose Constrictor, discarding Golgari Grave Troll. Noah then dredges Grave Troll back to his hand and mills 6 cards, including a land and life from the loam. Gitrog triggers, and he activates Noose Constrictor, discarding Grave Troll again. With the trigger on the stack, Philip casts Reality Shift, targeting the Gitrog monster. Ristic triggers, and Cal draws. Frog is exiled, and Noah manifests the top card of his library. Then Noah dredges Life from the Loam back to his hand. He draws for turn and plays a Snow-Covered Forest. He casts Life from the Loam. Both Ristics trigger, he pays for Cal's, and Philip draws. He returns Marsh Flats, Command Tower, and Swamp to his hand. He moves to combat and attacks Philip with Noose Constrictor. Philip takes the hit, and Noah passes the turn. At the end of Noah's turn, Philip cracks his Misty Rainforest, pays a life, and fetches up a Tundra onto the battlefield. He flashes in a Deep Dome Terramancer. Philip draws and plays an island. He casts a Ranger Captain of his own. Ristic triggers, and Cal draws. Ranger Captain enters, and he fetches up an Esper Sentinel into his hand. He pays 2 life to cast a Taxian Probe, targeting Cal. Cal draws from Ristic, and then Philip looks at his hand and draws a card. Philip passes the turn. At the end of Philip's turn, Cal taps his Mana Confluence to activate Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a pilot. Philip then discards the hand size, and the turn moves to Cal. During Cal's upkeep, Dante sacks his Ranger Captain of Eos. In response, Cal activates Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a pilot. Unable to find any sort of answer, Captain's ability resolves. Cal draws and plays an island for turn. Being locked out by Ranger Captain, he ends his turn, discarding to hand size. During his upkeep, Dante loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and casts an Allosaurus Shepherd with Cal and Philip drawing. He casts his commander, Kodama of the East Tree. Both Ristics trigger, and they both draw. Kodama enters, and Dante plays a Gemstone Caverns. He casts Culling the Weak, sacrificing Avacyn's Pilgrim as an additional cost. Cal and Philip draw, and Dante adds 4 black. He casts Sidisi, Undead Vizier, paying for both Ristics. Sidisi enters, and Kodama and Sidisi trigger. Dante exploits Sidisi, fetching up a card into his hand. Using the Kodama trigger, Dante puts Karmic Guide onto the battlefield. Guide enters and targets Sidisi. In response, Cal flashes in a Dress Down. Ristic triggers, and Cal pays. Dress Down enters, and Cal draws. Karmic Guide's trigger resolves, reanimating Sidisi, but it doesn't trigger due to Dress Down. With his win attempt thwarted, Dante passes the turn. At the end of Dante's turn, Dress Down is sacrificed. Noah draws and plays a Command Tower. He passes. Philip draws and also plays a Command Tower. He casts Esper Sentinel, paying for Ristic. He casts Mana Vault, paying for Ristic again. He ships the turn. At the end of Philip's turn, Cal casts Path to Exile, targeting Ranger Captain. Ristic and Esper trigger, and Cal pays. In response, Philip casts an Offer You Can't Refuse, targeting Path to Exile. Ristic triggers, and Cal draws. In response, Cal casts Fierce Guardianship for its alternate cost, targeting Offer. Ristic triggers, and Philip draws. In response, Philip casts Negate, targeting Path, paying for Ristic. Path is countered, and Fierce counters Offer. Philip gives the turn to Cal, discarding to hand size. During Cal's upkeep, Philip sacrifices his Ranger Captain, locking out his opponents from casting non-creature spells this turn. In response, Cal activates Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a pilot. He draws and plays the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale. An aggravated Cal ends the turn. During his upkeep, the Tabernacle, Karmic Guide, and Mana Crypt all trigger. He wins his Mana Crypt roll and doesn't pay for Karmic Guide's Echo trigger, sacrificing it. With the Tabernacle trigger still in the stack, he sacrifices Emergent Zone, letting him cast spells at instant speed. He casts Autumn's Veil. Both Cal and Philip draw from Ristic. One by one, each player passes priority, and Autumn's Veil resolves. He casts Diabolic Intent, sacrificing Sidisi as an additional cost. Cal and Philip draw, and Dante fetches up a card into his hand. He casts Reanimate, targeting Karmic Guide. Both Cal and Philip draw, and Dante returns Karmic Guide to the battlefield, losing 5 life. Kodama and Karmic Guide trigger. Dante returns CEDH to the battlefield, triggering Kodama and CEDH. He exploits CEDH, fetching a card into his hand. Kodama's trigger resolves, and he puts Felidar Guardian onto the battlefield. Kodama and Felidar trigger. He flickers Karmic Guide, triggering Kodama and Karmic Guide. He returns CEDH to the battlefield, triggering Kodama and CEDH. Dante exploits CEDH, fetching another card into his hand. Kodama's trigger resolves, and he puts Restoration Angel onto the battlefield. Kodama and Angel trigger. He flickers Felidar Guardian and Kodama and Guardian trigger. Dante presents a loop of flickering Restoration and Felidar Guardian, generating more and more Kodama triggers each time. He does this a few billion times, and on the final iteration, he flickers Karmic Guide, returning CEDH to the battlefield. CEDH exploits itself one final time, and Dante fetches up a card into his hand. Using his Kodama triggers, he puts Acerak the Archlich onto the battlefield. It triggers, bounces, and he ventures into the Lost Mines of Pandelver. He does this over and over, and each time he reaches the Dark Pool Room, each opponent loses 1 life and he gains 1 life. He does this enough times to drain his opponent's life totals, and Dante wins the game. Well, that was a crazy and unique combo from Dante. They had time for one more game, so let's go again. In this game, Dante brings back Tymna and Kodama, and his opening hand contains a Dark Ritual, Slaughter Pact, Windswept Teeth, Elves of Deep Shadow, Command Tower, Archivist of Ogma, and a Homeward Path. Noah brings back the Gitrog monster, and his opening hand contains a Land of War Wastes, Cavern of Souls, Carpet of Flowers, Elvish Mystic, Summoner's Pact, and his 2 London Mulligans are an Emergent Zone and an Endurance. Philip brings back Abdel Adrian and Candlekeep Sage, and his opening hand contains a Mystic Remora, Plains, Dispel, Drenith Magistrate, Force of Negation, Tundra, and a Displacer Kitten. Cal brings back Shorikai, and his opening hand contains an Urza's Saga, Skull Clamp, Hullbreaker Horror, Jataxian Probe, Swan Song, Plains, and a Tezzeret the Seeker. And Dante gets to start us off. Dante draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts an Elves of Deep Shadow. He passes. Noah draws and plays a Land of War Wastes. He taps it to help cast Elvish Mystic. He ends the turn. Philip draws and starts off his turn by paying 2 life to cast Jataxian Probe, targeting Dante. He looks at Dante's hand and draws a card. He plays a Tundra for turn. He casts Mystic Remora. With some weird reverse deja vu going on, the turn moves to Cal. Cal draws and plays an Urza's Saga, getting its first counter. He casts a Skull Clamp. Remora triggers and Philip draws. Cal passes. Dante draws and plays a Windswept Teeth. He casts Allosaurus Shepherd. Not wanting to feed the fish, he passes. Noah draws and casts Carpet of Flowers. Remora triggers and Philip draws. He moves to a second main phase, adding a green through his carpet. He casts Boreal Druid. He plays Cavern of Souls, naming Frog as it enters. Noah ships the turn. During his upkeep, Philip pays for his Remora. He draws and plays a Plains. He casts a Soul Ring. He casts a Talisman of Progress. Sitting in a good position, Philip ends his turn. Cal draws, and in his first main phase, Urza's Saga gets another counter. He plays a Plains for turn. He casts Cursed Totem. Remora triggers and Philip draws. In response, Dante cracks his Windswept Teeth, pays a life, and fetches up a Savannah onto the battlefield. He taps his Elves of Deep Shadow to flash in an Archivist of Ogma. With no other responses, Cursed Totem resolves. Cal passes the turn. Dante draws and plays a Homeward Path. He casts his commander, Tymna the Weaver. He moves to combat and attacks Philip with Elves of Deep Shadow, Noah with Archivist of Ogma, and Cal with Allosaurus Shepherd. They all take it, and in his second main phase, Tymna triggers. Dante lives the dream as he pays 3 life and draws 3 cards through Tymna. He casts a Lotus Petal. Remora triggers and Philip draws. With nothing else, Dante ships the turn. Noah draws, and in his first main phase, he adds a green through his carpet. He plays a Polluted Delta. He taps his Land of War Wastes to help cast Squandered Resources. Remora triggers and Philip draws. Noah gives the turn to Philip. During his upkeep, Philip pays for his Remora. He draws and plays a Plains. He casts Displacer Kitten. The table holds their breath as Kitten resolves, and Philip follows it up by passing the turn. Cal draws, and in his first main phase, Urza's Saga gets its final counter. He sacrifices Saga, fetching up a Mana Crypt onto the battlefield. Archivist triggers, Dante draws a card and gains a life. Cal pays 2 life to help cast Jataxian Probe, targeting Philip. Remora triggers and Philip draws. Cal looks at Philip's hand and draws a card. He plays an island for turn. He casts his commander, Shorikai, Genesis Engine. Remora triggers and Philip draws. Cal ends the turn. Dante draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Cal with Tymna and Noah with Archivist and Elves of Deep Shadow. They both take it, and Dante gains 2 life. In his second main phase, Dante pays 2 and draws 2 through Tymna. He plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He casts Silence. The table suddenly stands to attention and Remora triggers. Philip draws, and in response, Philip casts Force of Negation for its alternate cost, exiling a blue card. Displacer Kitten triggers and flickers Talisman of Progress. Silence is countered and exiled. Dante follows it up by tapping his Ancient Tomb to cast Academy Rector. Rector enters and Dante casts Slaughter Pact targeting Rector. Remora triggers and Philip draws. In response, Philip taps his Talisman to cast an Offer You Can't Refuse targeting Slaughter Pact. Kitten triggers targeting Talisman of Progress. In response, Dante casts Dark Ritual. Philip draws from Remora and Dante adds 3 black. Pact is countered and Dante creates 2 treasures. Dante pays 2 life to help cast Birthing Pod. Remora triggers and Philip draws. Pod resolves and with nothing else, Dante gives the turn to Noah. Noah draws and in his first main phase he adds a green through his carpet. He plays Undergrowth Stadium for turn. He cracks his Delta, pays a life, and fetches up a Bayou onto the battlefield. Archivist triggers, Dante draws a card and gains a life. Noah casts his commander, the Gitrog monster. He activates Squandered Resources, sacrificing Cavern of Souls and adding a black. Gitrog triggers and Noah draws. He sacrifices Llanowar Wastes, adding a green and drawing from Gitrog. He plays a Bloodstained Mire as his Gitrog land for turn. He cracks it and pays a life. Gitrog triggers and Noah draws. He fetches up an Overgrown Tomb into play untapped, paying 2 life. Archivist triggers, Dante draws a card and gains a life. He casts a Mana Crypt. Remora triggers and Philip draws. In response, Philip taps his Talisman to help cast Path to Exile targeting the Gitrog monster. Kitten triggers and he flickers his Talisman of Progress. Gitrog is exiled and Noah fetches up a forest onto the battlefield tapped. Archivist triggers and Dante draws a card and gains a life. Crypt then finally resolves and Noah follows it up by casting Eldritch Evolution, sacrificing Boreal Druid as an additional cost. Remora triggers and Philip draws. In response, Philip taps his Talisman to help cast Swan Song, targeting Eldritch Evolution. Kitten triggers and he flickers his Talisman. Evolution is countered and Noah creates a 2/2 bird. Disheartened by this series of events, Noah passes the turn. At the end of Noah's turn, Philip taps his Talisman to help cast Mystical Tutor. Kitten triggers and he flickers his Remora. Philip fetches up a Mindbreak Trap onto the top of his library and Archivist triggers. Dante draws a card and gains a life. The turn moves to Philip. During his upkeep, Philip pays for his Remora. He draws and plays a Prairie Stream. He casts Arcane Signet. Kitten triggers and flickers Soul Ring. He casts Drannith Magistrate. All finished up, Philip passes the turn, discarding the hand size. During his upkeep, Cal loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and plays a Forbidden Orchard. He casts Azorius Signet. Remora triggers and Philip draws. He activates Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a pilot. He equips Skull Clamp to a pilot, killing it and drawing 2. Cal ends his turn. At the end of Cal's turn, Philip casts Reality Shift, targeting Academy Rector. Kitten triggers and Philip flickers Soul Ring. Rector is exiled and Dante manifests the top card of his library. The turn moves to Dante. Dante draws and plays a Misty Rainforest. He casts Grand Abolisher. In response, Philip taps his Talisman to cast Delay, targeting Abolisher. Kitten triggers and he flickers Arcane Signet. Abolisher is countered and exiled with 3 time counters on it. Next, Dante casts Imperial Seal. Remora triggers and Philip draws. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He moves to combat and attacks Cal with Tymna. Cal takes it and Dante gains 2. In his second main phase, Dante pays 1 and draws 1 through Tymna. He cracks his Misty Rainforest and pays a life. In response, Philip flashes in a Deep Gnome Terramancer. Dante then fetches up a Temple Garden into play untapped, paying 2 life. Deep Gnome triggers and Philip fetches up an Irrigated Farmland onto the battlefield tapped. Archivist triggers and Dante draws a card and gains a life. Dante flips his Manifest creature, revealing Drannith Magistrate. With nothing else, Dante passes, discarding to hand size. During his upkeep, Noah loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and in his first main phase he adds 3 green through his carpet. He casts Court of Calling where X equals 3. Remora triggers and Philip draws. Noah fetches up Grist, the Hunger Tide, onto the battlefield. Archivist triggers, Dante draws and gains a life. Noah activates Grist's second ability, sacrificing his Elvish Mystic, destroying Displacer Kitten. Noah ends his turn. During his upkeep, Philip pays for his Remora. He draws and casts a Ponder. He looks at the top 3, rearranges, and draws. He plays a Flooded Strand. He passes. During his upkeep, Cal wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help activate Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a pilot. He clamps a pilot, drawing 2. He casts Fabricate. Remora triggers and Philip draws. Cal fetches up a Mox Opal into his hand and Archivist triggers. Dante draws a card and gains a life. He casts Mox Opal. Remora triggers and Philip draws. In response, Philip evokes Solitude, exiling a white card. It enters and exiles Archivist of Ogma, with Dante gaining 2 life. With the evoke trigger still in the stack, Philip casts Ephemerate, targeting Solitude. Solitude flickers and exiles Alsor's Shepherd. Solitude is then not sacrificed to the evoke trigger, and then Mox Opal resolves. Cal casts Merchant Scroll. Remora triggers and Philip draws. Cal fetches up a Fierce Guardianship into his hand, and then passes the turn. During his upkeep, Dante removes a time counter from Grand Abolisher. He draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Cal with Tymna and Noah with Drannith and Elves of Deep Shadow. Noah blocks the Elves with his Manifest creature, and they take the rest. Dante gains 2 life, and in his second main phase, Dante pays 2 life and draws 2 through Tymna. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Black Market Connections. Remora triggers and Philip draws. In response, Philip casts Negate, countering connections. Next, Dante casts Jeweled Lotus. Remora triggers, and in response, Philip casts Enlightened Tutor. He fetches up an Oblivion Ring onto the top of his library and then draws from Remora. Lotus resolves, and Dante follows it up with a Ranger Captain of Eos. It enters, and he fetches up a Serra Ascendant into his hand. He passes, discarding to hand size, including a Protean Hulk. During his upkeep, Noah wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and activates Grist's first ability, milling 1 and creating a 1/1 insect. He casts Sylvan Safekeeper. He passes. At the end of Noah's turn, Philip cracks his Flooded Strand, pays a life, and fetches up a Mystic Sanctuary onto the battlefield untapped. It triggers, and he puts Enlightened Tutor onto the top of his library. During his upkeep, Ephemerate rebounds. Philip casts Ephemerate, targeting Solitude. In response, Dante casts Orum's Chant, targeting Philip. Remora triggers, and Philip draws. Drannith is exiled, and Dante gains 1 life. Philip then pays for his Remora and draws. He plays an island, and locked out from casting spells, he passes. During his upkeep, Cal wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and plays a Tundra. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Hullbreaker Horror. In response, Philip hard casts Mindbreak Trap, targeting the Horror. In response, Cal casts Swansong, targeting Trap. Remora triggers, and Philip draws. In response, Philip casts Mana Leak, targeting Swansong. In response, Cal casts Fierce Guardianship for its alternate cost, targeting Mindbreak Trap. Remora triggers, and Philip draws. In response, Philip casts Flusterstorm, with all copies targeting Fierce Guardianship. Cal then taps his Forbidden Orchard, giving Noah a Spirit to activate Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a Pilot. Flusterstorm then counters Fierce, Mana Leak counters Swansong, and Mindbreak Trap exiles Hullbreaker Horror. Next, Cal clamps his Pilot, killing it and drawing 2 cards. Out of actions to take, he discards to hand size and gives the turn to Dante. During his upkeep, Dante removes a time counter from Grand Abolisher. Still in his upkeep, he casts Vampiric Tutor. Remora triggers, and Philip draws. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He draws and then evokes his own Solitude, exiling a white card. Solitude enters and exiles Philip's Drannith. Philip gains 1 life and Solitude is sacrificed. He cracks his Jeweled Lotus and taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast its commander, Kodama of the East Tree. He pays 2 life to activate Birthing Pod, sacrificing Tymna, fetching up a Restoration Angel onto the battlefield. Kodama and Angel triggers. He flickers Ranger Captain, triggering Ranger Captain and Kodama. Kodama's trigger resolves, and he puts Corpse Knight onto the battlefield. He then fetches up an Esper Sentinel into his hand. Kodama's trigger resolves, and he puts a Felidar Guardian onto the battlefield. Kodama, Felidar Guardian, and Corpse Knight all trigger. Each opponent loses a life, and Felidar flickers Restoration Angel. Kodama, Angel, and Corpse Knight trigger again. Each opponent loses 1 life, and Angel flickers Felidar Guardian. Dante presents a loop of continually having Felidar Guardian and Restoration flicker each other. Each time this happens, Corpse Knight triggers, and each opponent loses 1 life. Dante does this over and over until the table is dead, and Dante wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, those were some fun games tonight. Congrats to Dante on both of his wins. In Game 1, things weren't looking great, with Cal and Philip drawing card after card with their Mystics and Ristics. After Dante's first win attempt was thwarted, he was able to gather his resources and set up for another lethal strike just a few short turns later. In Game 2, Philip was off to an amazing start. He kept the entire table at bay with his Displacer Kit and value, plus continually keeping his hand overflowing with cards from Remora. In the end, he and the rest of the table ran out of interaction, and Dante was there to swoop in for the win. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more like this, please consider subscribing. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time and we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.